Welcome back to the Roast It Yourself podcast, brought to you by Coffee Bean Corral and Current Crop Roasting Shop. I am Stephen Burnett with Coffee Bean Corral in Jackson, Mississippi. And with me, as always, is Catherine Mansell, Director of Current Crop Roasting Shop and Certified Q Grader. Hey, Catherine, how are you today?
Hey, things are moving along down here. Just getting ready for Coffee Fest. NOLA Coffee Festival.
Oh man, I can't wait for that. I heard someone say that fall is just around the corner, and I think that person has never lived in the deep south before, because it's like November, we'll be here eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
But Coffee Fest, I am psyched about Coffee Fest. I've got my schedule. I'm going to be there all day on Friday, and I've got a wedding to do Saturday, which kind of disappoints me. But I'm okay. If you're the person whose wedding it is that I'm going to, I'm super excited to come to your wedding. But I am sad to miss Saturday at Coffee Fest. So you guys should come and see Catherine and me. Catherine is going to be hard to track down because she'll be all over the place, spreading her coffee roasting knowledge and skills and tasting and just doing all the things. Yes. What is that?
Three
things.
I'm going to do an intro to varietals class on Friday for local baristas, and then on Saturday a home roasting 101 class. And then I'll be on a panel.
What do you know about teaching people how to roast coffee?
I'll just wing it.
I love it. And what's the third one?
It's going to be a panel about the women in the coffee industry in New Orleans.
Very cool. Yeah, they didn't ask me to be on that one. I can't imagine. But anyway, that's wonderful. So show up to New Orleans Coffee Fest, NOLA Coffee Fest, up in September. We're looking forward to that very much. Well, each week we spend about 10 minutes to answer a question from home roasters and professionals alike about roasting, tasting, and most importantly, enjoying coffee. You can send your questions to questions@RIYpod, roast it yourself pod, RIYpod.com, and you'll get a nice shout out from us and get your question answered. And today we have a question from a listener and friend of Coffee Bean Corral, Bob from Bluffton, South Carolina. Now, this is a unique question because this is a question from someone who's bought coffee from us, and he's got some comments and things we're going to get into. So I'm kind of looking forward to this. And Bob from Bluffton, South Carolina writes, first of all, thank you for the podcast, which I very much enjoy. While I do not have a question, I do have a comment on 3 of the Coffee Bean Corral coffees. We roasted these 3 with very different results. The best in Bob's opinion, the Brazil Organic Fazenda Dutra, which screamed chocolate, 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 plus had a wonderful, smooth, well-balanced coffee taste. Second was the Ethiopian Conga G1 Yirgacheffe. And while we did not notice the blueberry aroma or taste, the coffee was so sweet and wonderful. One word that would describe this coffee is sweet. That's all caps. I hope I emphasize that. And delicious, by the way. Our third coffee was the Bali Kintamani from the sample pack. It was discussed in one of your podcasts as one you're in favor of. It's my favorite. I think it is my favorite coffee.
Yeah.
So it's one that we talked about. For us, it was the worst tasting coffee I ever roasted. And just stab a knife in my heart, Bob. Just plunge it right there. I read that one twice when I got this email. We could use your help. Could not determine if it was under roasted or what, but we failed this coffee. We roast, and this is giving us some description of how we roast. We roast on a fresh roast SR 800, bring the temp up to 180 and full crack, then work it down toward cooling. The roast time from start to cooling runs about 10 minutes tops. Thank you for the podcast and the wonderful coffees. Regards, Bob, Bluffton, South Carolina. Bob, thank you very much for the comments and the question there.
Yeah, thanks, Bob.
Shots fired, obviously, right? Like we gotta have to deal with this, but I'm excited to actually tackle it and excited to get into this. So, let's go in order. Let's do this in Bob's order. Catherine, what do you think about his best coffee, the Brazil Organic Fazenda Dutra?
I agree. I like this coffee. We have it here at the shop in New Orleans, and we use it a lot in the roasting class to give people some Brazilian coffee to go home and try. It is a natural process, but it's not one where the fermentation is overpowering, so it just ends up being really smooth. So I agree on that one. That's a good chocolate smooth cup of coffee.
Yeah, that's an excellent one. And people like I think Brazil kind of, because it has so much coffee production and a lot of it's commodity grade, people kind of turn up their nose at a Brazilian coffee just out of the gate, almost on reputation. And I think that's totally unwarranted. There are some outstanding Brazilian coffees. And in my mind, they do bring they bring the body, they bring the mouthfeel. If you want a espresso, a Brazilian coffee is not going to be a mistake. Like they're going to come out and just stand up really well.
Yeah.
Second, Ethiopian Conga G1 Yirgacheffe, classic Yirgacheffe, but this is a washed. This is not a natural processed coffee. And Catherine, what do you think? I mean, we've talked a little bit about this one. To me, I agree that the Yirgacheffe is known for like the fruity flavors and the really kind of punch you in the mouth, bright fruity acidity. But this is a washed coffee, and so the processing makes. I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong. Processing makes a bigger difference between coffees than just about any other factor you can play into it.
Yeah.
And if you're looking for that blueberry stuff, Yirgacheffe is a good place to go. Natural is going to be going to bring you more of that.
Right. Well, one thing that you have to remember when you're thinking about, am I going to taste blueberry in the coffee? Now, remember, it's not saying that you're going to get a handful of blueberries and stuff your mouth with blueberries and it's just going to be all over. Most of the time, you're picking up that note in a very small amount. You also have to think about blueberry with a little bit of that, what is the right word for this? It's got a little earthiness to it, a little wood note in a blueberry. So that's something to keep in mind too. Sometimes it can be a little bit difficult being able to pick up everything on cupping notes, but you just have to remember sometimes it's just a hint of something that's there.
Right. And when people write cupping notes, typically they want to put the most attractive notes on top, and they may not be the most prominent tasting note of the coffee. Like if there's blueberry in there, that most graders are going to put blueberry up front, even if it's more of a chocolate coffee, just because chocolate's kind of a dime a dozen coffee flavor. And I know I'm talking Catherine's business, but yeah, that's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
And the third coffee, and I'm just going to take this one. The Bali. You can comment later, Catherine. This is let me have this one.
Sure.
The Bali Kintamani. Yeah, I mean, I think what I'm seeing in this whole list is a trajectory, and it kind of indicates a lot of personal taste, which is really important. We get into coffee roasting so we can make the coffee that we want to drink, and we're not beholden to some guy in a room somewhere to make the coffee we like.
Yeah.
And so personal taste is really, really important. And the Fazenda Dutra, though it is a natural, is definitely more of a classic coffee category than the Kintamani. Kintamani is pushing the envelope flavor wise. It is very pungent. Green. It's pungent roasted. It's very fermenty. We've had people call Coffee Bean Corral and say this coffee is sour, like it's spoiled in the bag, before they get it. And you have to explain, no, that is the process. That is what happens in the process. And so it's my favorite coffee. That certainly is not meant to imply that it is universally beloved by absolutely everyone, because a lot of people, it's not their taste.
Yeah.
So I would venture to say, we can get into the roast process in a second. I would venture to say you didn't mess this coffee up necessarily. You might just not like the really punchy, fermented natural process of the Bali Kintamani.
Yeah.
That being said, Catherine, could we say anything about the roast, his roast process, the information he's given us that may help him get something different out of it?
Well, so for me, with the barley being a natural process, with it having a lot of chaff, my struggle is getting all the beans very even when I'm using my fresh roast. So what I've been doing recently to sort of even everything out is once your beans are going through the first crack and you can hear it being consistent, they're continuously popping. Once they start to slow down a little bit, I'll move over to the power setting and lower it all the way to 1. It sort of stalls out the increasing temperature for a second so the rest of the beans can catch up, so you get a more even, a more uniform roast. The Kintamani is a natural process like the Dutra, like you said, but the fermentation is really quite apparent. I actually use the Kintamani a lot in my intro to cupping classes so people can have an idea of what that funky fermented smell and taste is. And it's not for everybody. It really isn't. The first time somebody handed me a cup of coffee at Coffee Bean Corral, it was the first time I had ever tasted a natural process. And I took a sip and I gave it right back. And I said, there's something wrong with that. It doesn't taste like the coffee that I've ever had before. But I'd never tasted a natural process. And for a while, it was off and different for me. But the more that I understood the process and what it goes through and what the results are, the more I leaned into it, especially when I started evaluating coffees. Wash coffees are always fun. I love wash coffees, but natural processes are a little bit more fun to cup for my palate. So I put it into the cupping class, and you can tell people either think it's interesting or they hate it. So there's no really in between.
Right.
The Kintamani is special for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, no, and I completely agree with that. I think one other thing I want to say, and we get a lot of emails from people asking about how to like tweak their roast, how to tweak their roast process. And I want to just say as a general hint or tip, like, and we have all these little tools like temperature monitoring on the fresh roast. We have people put probes in there and everything else, but temperature probes can be wrong. They can require what's the word I'm looking for? To be set correctly. I'm not, what's the word for that? For anyway, doesn't matter. Calibration. They can require
Right.
calibration. They can be wrong. These tools are not always as precise as we need them to be, but the coffee doesn't lie. The coffee doesn't lie. So honestly, for precision, a timer and a notebook and your eyes and ears are going to be the best thing because you can watch that coffee change. And when that coffee hits yellowing, I don't care what the temperature reading is. That coffee's entering the yellowing phase, right? When that coffee starts popping, I don't care what the temperature says. It's first cracked. And so those things the coffee's telling you, they don't lie to you. That is what we need to be paying attention to. So, like, I hit first crack at this time. I hit yellowing at this time. I waited this long after the end of first crack. First crack lasted this long. Like, that gives, that's a more universal way of talking about coffee roasting that can be applied. Doesn't even matter if you're on the same roaster. Like, you may say, oh, I used setting number 8 and then setting number 7. And that only works talking to other fresh roast people. But if you're able to give them this universal, like, this is what the coffee did and this is how long it did it, that'll help you translate this across different roasters and different coffees and all that kind of stuff. So just a piece of advice as we think about this stuff, don't lean too much into the tools. Like, use your eyes, ears, notepad, and a timer, because those things are like the most like firm way without getting a really expensive coffee machine or roaster to get that stuff. So
Yeah.
now I'm just rambling. That was brought to you completely for free. My opinions on technology. I'm a Luddite. So, Bob from Bluffton, South Carolina, thanks so much for your email, and we hope this answer was helpful. And we have no ill will at all about your opinion about the Valley Kintamani. Thank you so
Right.
much for telling us,
Yes.
writing to us. We'd love to hear this kind of feedback from you
Yeah.
guys. Catherine, we left something out. I don't know what it is, but we
Something.
left something.
Yeah.
We certainly did.
Yeah.
Yeah, something. So, dear listeners, my wife is a doctor, and she tells me that hypertension is a killer, and stress can bring you down. So, we don't want you to be stressed. We don't want you to bottle it up. Get into the comment section and tell us what we missed. Tell us what's frustrating you. Tell us your least favorite coffee.
Yeah.
But let's start a trend. What's
Yeah.
the worst coffee you've ever tasted, or worst coffee you've ever roasted?
Yeah.
And let's share this. Let's talk about it, because this is important. Talking about taste, talking about roasting, technique and all of that kind of stuff is going to be important. So thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast, for listening to it, for sharing it, for commenting on it. It means the world and helps us to grow this pod. We couldn't do it without you.
Yeah.
We also couldn't do it without our audio video wizard, Josh Santmeyer. And I said his name correctly this week. I said it wrong last week. And our amazing graphic designer, Jatavian Walker. Thank you both for everything you do week after week to make this podcast possible. Remember to send any questions you have about coffee in general or coffee roasting in particular to questions@riypod.com. Otherwise, have a wonderful day and happy roasting.
Happy roasting.